Imagine checking into a hospital and never checking out. Not because you passed, but because your spirit decided the hospital halls were your eternal home. This isn't fiction. Get ready for the chilling true story of the ghostly patient who still wanders, still haunts, and still makes their presence terrifyingly known within these very walls. Welcome back to Silent Revelations, where the stories you'll hear aren't just told, they're felt. Tonight's chilling tale is about a patient who checked into the hospital like anyone else, but never truly left. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and join us, because some stories like this one are far too unsettling to experience alone. It started as a routine admission. A man in his late 50s, average build, nothing unusual. He came in complaining of chest pain, shortness of breath, classic symptoms. The nurses did what they always did. Vitals, IV line, paperwork, everything seemed normal. Just another patient, another long night shift. But that's when the first whispers began. Not actual whispers, no, not yet. Something subtler. One nurse recalled that when she entered his room, the air felt colder, heavier. Another said that when she looked at him, she had the strange sensation he was staring through her, even when his eyes were closed. Little details, the kind you dismiss when you're tired and overworked. Hours passed. Tests were run. The doctors prepared for what they suspected might be a heart attack. But as suddenly as he came in, his condition worsened. His pulse weakened, his breathing slowed, and then, flatline. A code blue was called. The team rushed in, compressions, oxygen, adrenaline. They fought for him. But after 30 minutes, the attending physician had no choice. He looked at the clock and quietly pronounced the time of death. The room fell silent. The team stepped back. Machines were turned off. The body was still. But one nurse swore she felt a presence remain, as though the man had not fully left with his final breath. She described it later as if something stayed behind, hovering just beyond sight. It was only the beginning. Because in that moment, the hospital gained a permanent resident, a patient who never checked out. After the patient's death, the hospital should have returned to normal. The staff had seen death before, too many times. The room was cleaned, sanitized, prepared for the next admission. But that was when the echoes began. At first, it was subtle. Nurses on night shift reported sudden, icy drafts sweeping through the corridor, even when all the windows were locked shut. Security guards claimed to hear phantom footsteps echoing down empty hallways, measured, deliberate, always heading toward the room where he had died. One nurse recounted how she left a chart on the counter, only to return seconds later and find it lying on the floor, as if someone had pushed it with unseen hands. Another swore she saw the IV pole move, ever so slightly on its own, as though being wheeled by an invisible presence. It wasn't just the staff. Patients began to notice too. A young woman admitted for pneumonia woke in the middle of the night, terrified. She pressed her call button, trembling as she told the nurse, "There was a man standing at the foot of my bed. He asked me if the doctor had come yet. But when the nurse rushed in, the room was empty." Another patient, a child, told her mother that an old man had sat beside her bed, gently asking if she was scared. Yet the description she gave matched no one in the hospital staff, only the man who had died in that very ward days earlier. The strangest part? Each witness described him the same way. Late 50s, average build, and eyes that seemed to stare right through you. Doctors, nurses, cleaners, patients, each account matched perfectly. The hospital tried to ignore it, to explain it away as stress, fatigue, imagination. But the events escalated, lights flickering whenever his name was mentioned, equipment malfunctioning without reason, security footage showing empty corridors, yet sensors triggered by movement. He was no longer a patient, he was a permanent resident. And he wasn't just lingering, he was watching. And soon, the haunting would spread beyond his room. By now, the hospital staff had accepted an unsettling truth. The ghostly patient was not leaving. And what made it worse was the realization that he followed a routine. The first place his presence was strongest was, of course, the room where he had died. Room 307. Nurses avoided it whenever possible. Even when empty, the bed sheets would wrinkle as though someone had just climbed in. The chair beside the bed, where visitors usually sat, would sometimes scrape across the floor, as if pulled closer to an invisible patient. But the haunting did not stop there. The corridor outside his room became another hotspot. At exactly 3:17 every morning, staff reported the same sound, footsteps, steady and patient, pacing up and down. Those brave enough to check found nothing, yet the sound of shoes on linoleum followed them back until they fled the hall. Even stranger, the waiting area on the second floor became a place of dread. Patients and visitors swore they felt watched, especially near the vending machine. One cleaner quit her job after she heard coins drop and a soda can clatter out of the machine, though no one had touched it and no one was there. And then, the staff noticed his hours of activity. The ghost seemed tied to the night shift. Between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., the so-called witching hours, his presence was undeniable. Lights flickered, thermometers dropped to freezing, monitors beeped with heart rates. Though no patients were connected, but there was something even more unnerving. They discovered the things that seemed to calm him. When a nurse left a newspaper on the chair in room 307, just as the man used to request during his hospital stay, the disturbances lessened for the night. When a radio played softly in the waiting area, tuned to the old jazz station he once loved, the halls were quieter. It was as though the ghostly patient clung to fragments of the life he once had, his routines, his comforts, still repeating them, night after night, in a place he refused to leave. But comforting him came at a cost, because the moment his routine was disturbed, his presence turned violent, and the hospital would soon learn, you cannot keep a ghost satisfied forever. By this point, the hospital staff no longer denied the truth. The ghostly patient was real. Too many had seen him, too many had felt him, but what none of them agreed on was what to do about it. Some nurses began to treat the empty room 307 as though he were still alive. They left newspapers folded neatly on the chair. They spoke softly when they entered, greeting him as if he were resting there. One nurse even swore that when she whispered good night before leaving, the icy chill in the room lifted, just slightly. Others were less willing. They avoided the room entirely, refusing to step inside after dark. One doctor, skeptical of the haunting, walked in late one night and mocked the ghost, telling him to finally check out. Within seconds, every monitor in the ward lit up at once, blaring alarms. Not a single patient was connected. The doctor never returned to the night shift again. Whispers spread quickly. Some staff believed the ghost responded to respect, others insisted he craved acknowledgement. But everyone agreed on one thing: the haunting was growing bolder. It wasn't long before word reached beyond the hospital walls. A small team of paranormal investigators was called in, unofficially, of course. The hospital administration wanted no record, no scandal, no headlines about a haunted ward. The investigators brought equipment, thermal cameras, EMF detectors, voice recorders, and what they found was chilling. Temperature drops of more than 20 degrees, concentrated only in room 307. Shadowy figures caught on camera, only to vanish seconds later. And on one recording, a faint voice, raspy, almost pleading, whispering the words, "Doctor, am I next?" The investigators left shaken. Their report never went public, but copies of the recordings circulated quietly among the staff. The hospital's official stance? Denial. Administrators called it rumors, exaggerations, stress-induced hysteria. They told the media nothing. To new employees, the ghost was never mentioned. But within the staff break rooms, in the quiet of the night shift, in whispered conversations between nurses, everyone knew the truth. The ghostly patient was still there, and the more they tried to explain him away, the stronger he seemed to become. And soon, ignoring him would no longer be an option. Years have passed since the patient's death. Staff have come and gone, new doctors, new nurses, even renovations to the ward. And yet, the legend of room 307 remains. It is whispered among the staff during orientation, passed along in hushed voices. Never stay alone in the corridor after 3 a.m. Don't mock the patient. If you feel the cold, leave immediately. They call him the permanent resident, a patient who never checked out. Modern-day reports continue. A young intern in her first week claimed she saw a man sitting in the waiting area, reading a newspaper. She greeted him politely, only to realize a moment later the seats were empty, the paper gone. A visitor waiting for news about her father swore she heard a voice beside her whisper, "The doctor will be with you soon." But when she turned, she was completely alone. And just last year, a security guard filed a report describing how the vending machine dispensed a soda at 3:17 a.m. The can rolled across the floor and stopped at his feet. Printed on the receipt tape inside the machine was the date of the patient's death. But the question that haunts them all is why? Why does he remain here, forever pacing the halls, forever repeating his routine? Some believe he died in confusion, still waiting for the doctor who never saved him. Others say he is tethered to the comforts he knew, the newspaper, the jazz music, the waiting room. And a few whisper darker theories, that the hospital hides a truth about his death that was never revealed. Whatever the reason, one thing is certain: he does not rest. The ghostly patient lingers still, in the shadows, in the silence, in the flicker of the lights at 3 a.m. And until his story is understood, until someone finds a way to release him, Room 307 will never truly be empty.